The moment Lena Voss slipped that note across the table, she signed her own death warrant, or so she thought. One whispered warning to a stranger in an expensive suit. One desperate attempt to save a life she didn't even know. That single choice shattered the invisible walls that had kept her safe in obscurity. Now, the most dangerous man in the city owns her fate. His enemies circle like wolves, and the woman who tried to kill him wants Lena's blood on her hands. This is the story of how a waitress became a weapon, how protection became obsession, and how one night changed everything. If you're watching from your city right now, drop a comment below and tell me where you're from. I want to see how far Lena's story reaches. And if you're ready for a tale of danger, transformation, and impossible choices, hit that like button and stay with me until the very end. The fluorescent lights in Romano's cucina buzzed with the same tired frequency they had for the past 8 years. A persistent, barely noticeable hum that Lena Voss had long since learned to tune out. It was Wednesday, which meant the restaurant would be half empty until the late dinner rush, leaving her plenty of time to refold napkins, polish water glasses that didn't need polishing, and become invisible in the way that only people who serve other people truly understand. Lena moved through the dining room like a ghost, her worn sneakers silent against the checkered floor. At 27, she had perfected the art of being overlooked. Shoulders slightly hunched, eyes downcast, movements efficient but unremarkable. In a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business, she had somehow managed to remain a blank space, a face without a story. "Table 6 needs water," Marco called from behind the bar, not bothering to look up from his phone. She grabbed a pitcher without responding. Marco had worked at Romano's for 3 months and already acted like he owned the place. Lena had been here since she was 19, since the day after her mother's funeral when she'd needed a job, any job, and had been too numb to care that the pay was barely minimum wage and the tips were inconsistent at best. The lunch crowd had thinned to just a handful of regulars, Mrs. Chen sat in her usual corner booth making a single plate of pasta last 2 hours while she read romance novels on her tablet. 2 construction workers occupied the counter, arguing about a football game in rough, friendly voices. And in the back, near the kitchen doors, sat Tommy Rizzo, who came in every Wednesday to eat carbonara and conduct business that Lena had learned long ago not to notice. She refilled water glasses with practiced precision, her mind already calculating how much she'd make today, how much would go to rent, how much to the electric bill that was 2 weeks overdue. The math never changed, never worked out in her favor, but she ran the numbers anyway because it gave her something to focus on besides the ache in her feet and the hollow feeling that this was all there would ever be. "Lena," Giuseppe Romano's voice carried from the kitchen. "You take the front tonight, yes?" Maria called in sick again. She nodded, though he couldn't see her. Maria called in sick every other week, usually when her boyfriend was in town. Lena always covered. She always said yes because saying no meant fewer hours, and fewer hours meant choosing between groceries and keeping the heat on in her studio apartment. The afternoon crawled by in its usual rhythm. She served coffee to the old men who gathered to argue about politics. She smiled politely when Mr. Davies made the same joke he made every week about running away together. She cleared plates, wiped down tables, and pretended not to hear when Tommy Rizzo's voice rose sharply during a phone call that made the construction workers suddenly decide to leave. By 6 o'clock, the dinner service began to pick up. Families filtered in, drawn by the smell of Giuseppe's red sauce, the one recipe he guarded more carefully than his tax returns. The noise level rose, filling the restaurant with the comfortable chaos of clinking silverware and overlapping conversations. Lena worked mechanically, her body moving through motions it had performed thousands of times before. Take the order, bring the food, clear the plates, smile when appropriate, disappear when not needed. She was refilling bread baskets when the temperature in the room seemed to drop. It was subtle at first, a slight shift in the ambient noise, a fractional pause in conversations. Lena looked up, following the collective gaze of the other diners toward the entrance. 3 men stood in the doorway. The first 2 were broad-shouldered and hard-eyed, the kind of men who wore expensive suits like armor. They scanned the restaurant with the mechanical precision of security cameras, their hands resting casually near their jacket openings in a way that made Lena's stomach tighten. But it was the third man who commanded attention. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with dark hair styled just carelessly enough to look deliberate. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind that cost more than Lena made in 3 months. But it wasn't the clothes that made people stare. It was something in the way he moved, a quiet, absolute confidence that suggested he'd never had to raise his voice to be heard, never had to threaten because his mere presence was threat enough. Giuseppe appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. For a moment, Lena thought he might refuse service. The set of his jaw suggested he was considering it. But then the man's dark eyes met Giuseppe's, and something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps, or resignation. "Mr. Volkov," Giuseppe said carefully, "we have a table for you." Adrian Volkov. The name dropped into Lena's consciousness like a stone into still water. She'd heard it before, whispered in the kind of conversations that stopped when she approached. She'd seen it in newspaper articles she'd glimpsed over customers' shoulders, always buried in the back pages, always carefully worded, always hinting at things the reporters couldn't quite prove. He was a businessman, technically. Import-export, the articles said. Legitimate enterprises, his lawyers insisted. But in Little Italy, everyone knew what those careful words really meant. Adrian Volkov was power. Adrian Volkov was danger. Adrian Volkov was the kind of man you didn't look at directly unless you wanted to be remembered. Lena immediately looked down at her notepad. Giuseppe led the three men to the best table in the house. The corner booth near the window, the one usually reserved for anniversary dinners and marriage proposals. The two bodyguards took up positions at a nearby table, sitting with their backs to the wall, eyes on the entrance. "Lena," Giuseppe's voice was tight when he returned to the service station. "You take that table." Her head snapped up. "What? No, Marco's handling the bar. You take it." His expression left no room for argument. "Just be professional. Don't ask questions. Don't linger. Understand?" She understood that Giuseppe was scared, which scared her more than anything else. In 8 years, she'd never seen him rattled. Even when Tommy Rizzo's business meetings occasionally ended with raised voices and veiled threats, Giuseppe had maintained his careful neutrality. But Adrian Volkov was different. Lena grabbed a menu and water glass, her hands steadier than she felt. The walk across the dining room seemed to take forever. She was hyper-aware of the way conversations had dropped to murmurs, the way other diners were very carefully not looking at the corner booth. Volkov was reading something on his phone when she approached, his expression unreadable. Up close, he was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s maybe, with sharp features that suggested Eastern European ancestry. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, the only imperfection in an otherwise flawless presentation. "Water?" Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. He glanced up, and for a brief moment their eyes met. His were dark, not brown exactly, but something deeper, the kind of eyes that missed nothing. "Yes." His accent was faint, softened by years in America, but still present in the way he shaped his vowels. "And a scotch. Macallan 25, if Giuseppe still keeps it." Of course he would know what Giuseppe kept in the locked cabinet behind the bar. "I'll check, sir." "Adrian." The correction was soft but firm. "I don't like being called sir. It makes me feel old." Lena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She retreated to the bar, where Marco was already pouring the scotch with shaking hands. "Giuseppe keeps this for special occasions," he muttered. "Guess this qualifies." She delivered the drink without comment, took his dinner order, the veal, prepared the way Giuseppe's mother used to make it, which wasn't on the menu but somehow Volkov knew to ask for, and returned to the kitchen. "Don't stare at him," Giuseppe warned the line cooks. "Don't talk about him. Just cook the food and pretend this is a normal night." But it wasn't a normal night. Lena could feel it in the air, in the way Tommy Rizzo had settled his tab early and left, in the way families with young children suddenly remembered they had somewhere else to be. The restaurant was emptying. By 7:30, only a handful of tables remained occupied, and Lena was certain they were staying precisely because they were too scared to leave while Volkov was still there. To walk out now would be to acknowledge his presence, to admit they knew who he was and what he represented. She brought his meal, set it down with minimal fuss, and turned to go. "The restaurant is clearing out." His voice stopped her. It wasn't a question. "It's a Wednesday, sir. Adrian." She caught herself. "Slow night." His eyes flicked to the window, to the street outside where she could see a black Mercedes idling. Is that what you tell yourself? Before she could respond, the door chimed. A woman walked in. She was beautiful in the way that expensive maintenance could achieve. Perfectly highlighted blonde hair, designer dress, heels that cost more than Lena's monthly rent. But there was something sharp in her smile, something cold in her eyes as they found Volkov across the room. Adrian, her voice carried, performatively warm. What a surprise. Volkov's expression didn't change, but Lena felt him go still in the way prey animals freeze before deciding whether to run or fight. Katya. He set down his fork with deliberate care. I thought you were in Miami. I was. I came back early. She crossed the restaurant, her heels clicking against the floor. Aren't you going to invite me to sit? I'm having dinner. I can see that. Her smile sharpened. In our old neighborhood, at our old restaurant. How sentimental. Lena began to back away, but Katya's gaze snapped to her with predatory focus. You, bring me a wine list. It wasn't a request. Lena retrieved the wine list from the hostess stand, her mind racing. The air between Volkov and this woman, Katya, was electric with barely suppressed violence. This wasn't a chance encounter. This was a confrontation. When she returned with the list, Katya was sitting across from Volkov, uninvited, her designer handbag placed carefully on the table between them. The Barolo, Katya said without looking at the list. The 2015. Adrian, you'll share a bottle with your wife, won't you? Wife. The word hung in the air like a blade. Lena poured the wine with mechanical precision, trying not to notice the way Volkov's jaw had tightened, the way his fingers had shifted almost imperceptibly closer to the edge of the table. We're divorced, Katya. Are we? She took a sip of wine, her eyes never leaving his face. The papers say so, I suppose, but we both know paper doesn't mean much in our world. Our world. His voice was flat. You chose to leave that world when you left me. I chose to stop pretending I didn't know what you were. She leaned forward slightly. There's a difference. Lena turned to go, desperate to escape whatever this was, but Katya's hand shot out and caught her wrist. The grip was surprisingly strong, fingers pressing just hard enough to hurt without leaving marks. Stay close, Katya said, her smile never wavering. We might want another bottle. Lena's heart hammered as she stepped back to the service station, just out of direct earshot but close enough to respond if called. Giuseppe had disappeared into the kitchen. Marco had found urgent business in the storage room. The few remaining customers were studiously focused on their own meals. She was alone on the floor with them. The conversation at the corner booth continued in low, tense voices. Lena couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language. Katya leaning in, pressing some point, Volkov leaning back, his posture radiating controlled danger. And then Lena noticed something. The two bodyguards at the nearby table had shifted their positions. They were no longer watching the entrance. They were watching Volkov. And there was something in their eyes that made Lena's blood run cold. They were waiting. Her gaze swept the restaurant again, seeing it with new eyes. The kitchen doors were closed, unusual for this time of night. The back exit light was off. It was always on. And the black Mercedes that had been idling outside was gone. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a trap. Lena's mind raced. She should walk away. She should go to the kitchen, claim she was sick, leave through the back, and forget she'd ever seen any of this. She was a waitress, invisible and unimportant, and this was not her fight. But she thought about Mrs. Chen, who'd been coming to Romano's 3 times a week for 5 years and had never once learned Lena's name. She thought about the regulars who'd never left her a tip above 15%, who looked through her like she was furniture. She thought about Giuseppe, who paid her just enough that she couldn't afford to quit, but never enough to actually get ahead. She thought about being invisible. And then she thought about the fact that if something happened here, in this restaurant, the police would question everyone. They would ask her what she'd seen. They would want to know why she hadn't warned anyone, why she hadn't called for help. They would see her. The kitchen doors swung open, and Giuseppe emerged carrying a tray of desserts for one of the remaining tables. He looked at Lena, and for just a second, their eyes met. In that moment, she saw the same recognition she'd felt, the understanding that something was very wrong. Giuseppe gave the slightest shake of his head. Don't get involved. But Lena was already moving. She grabbed an order pad and pen, her hand shaking so badly she could barely write. The message came out in rushed, desperate scrawl. Your wife set a trap. Leave now. She walked to the corner booth on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Katya was talking about property, about assets, about things that would be divided and disputed. Volkov was listening with the patience of someone who'd heard it all before. More wine? Lena's voice cracked. Katya waved her off dismissively, but Volkov looked up. Their eyes met again, and Lena did something she'd never done before, something that went against every instinct she'd cultivated in 8 years of being invisible. She held his gaze, and then she set the notepad on the table, face up, right where he could see it. For a long moment, nothing happened. Katya continued talking, oblivious. The bodyguards remained still. The remaining diners ate their meals, and Volkov read the note. His expression didn't change, not even a flicker. But something shifted in his eyes, a sharpening of focus that made Lena's breath catch. He set down his wine glass with deliberate care. Katya, his voice cut through her monologue. We're done here. We're done when I say we're done. He stood, the movement fluid and final. My lawyers will contact yours. Katya's face went hard. Adrian, your men in the kitchen can come out now. He said it loud enough to carry. And the ones you have waiting outside can stand down. Whatever you're planning, it ends now. The color drained from Katya's face. I don't know what... Yes, you do. He turned to Lena, and she saw something unexpected in his expression. Not gratitude, exactly. Recognition, perhaps. Thank you for the service. He pulled out his wallet and placed $300 bills on the table, more than Lena made in a week. Then he walked toward the entrance, moving with the same unhurried confidence he'd had when he arrived. The bodyguards who'd been sitting nearby stood to follow him, but Volkov stopped, turned, and looked at them with eyes that had gone cold. Stay. It was a single word, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The men froze, uncertainty flickering across their faces. And in that uncertainty, Lena understood. They hadn't been his bodyguards at all. They'd been Katya's, waiting for the signal, the moment, the perfect time to turn on him. Volkov walked out of Romano's cucina alone, disappearing into the Manhattan night. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. Then Katya surged to her feet, her designer handbag clattering to the floor. Her face was twisted with rage as she looked at Lena. What did you do? Her voice was low, venomous. What did you fucking do? Lena stepped back, her heart slamming against her ribs. I was just serving... You warned him. Katya advanced, and Lena saw real murder in her eyes. You stupid little bitch! You warned him! The two men moved to flank Katya, their hands going to their jackets. Giuseppe burst from the kitchen, his face pale. Not in my restaurant, he said, his voice shaking. Whatever this is, not in my restaurant. Katya's laugh was sharp and bitter. Your restaurant? Do you know who owns the building you're in, Giuseppe? Do you know who holds your lease? Giuseppe said nothing, which was answer enough. I want her name. Katya pointed at Lena without looking away from Giuseppe. I want to know everything about her. Her name, Giuseppe, or tomorrow morning you'll get an eviction notice. The old man's shoulders sagged. Lena Voss. Lena felt the world tilt. Giuseppe had given her up without hesitation, had handed her over to save his restaurant, his livelihood. And she couldn't even blame him, because she would have done the same thing in his position. That was what it meant to be invisible. It meant being expendable. Katya smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Lena had ever seen. Lena Voss. She tested the name like she was tasting wine. Well, Lena, you've made a very serious mistake tonight, and you're going to spend a very long time regretting it. She gestured to her men, and they followed her out of the restaurant, leaving Lena shaking in the middle of the empty dining room. The few remaining customers scattered like leaves, suddenly remembering they had somewhere else to be. Within minutes, the restaurant was empty except for Lena, Giuseppe, and Marco, who'd emerged from the storage room looking like he might be sick. You need to leave, Giuseppe said. His voice was flat, emotionless. I can't protect you, Lena. I can't afford to protect you. I understand. And she did. She'd always understood that she was alone in this world. She untied her apron with numb fingers, folded it carefully, and set it on the bar next to the $300 Volkov had left. Giuseppe wouldn't let her keep it. It would disappear into the register, into the restaurant's accounts. Just another transaction. She walked out the back entrance into the alley behind Romano's, into the Manhattan night that had suddenly become very dangerous. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Don't go home. They'll be waiting. Lena stared at the message, her mind struggling to process it. Adrian Volkov, the man she'd saved, the man who'd just made her visible in the worst possible way. A second message followed. Black car at the end of the alley. Get in. We need to talk. She looked up. Sure enough, a black sedan was idling 30 feet away, its engine a soft purr in the darkness. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear, to become invisible again. But she was past that now. The moment she'd slipped him that note, she'd stepped out of the shadows and into a light that was harsh and unforgiving. Lena walked to the car. The back door opened from the inside, and she slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her entire apartment's furniture. The door closed with a solid, expensive thunk, and the car began to move. Adrian Volkov sat across from her in the dim interior, his dark eyes studying her face. You're either very brave or very stupid, he said finally. I haven't decided which. Neither. Her voice was steadier than she felt. I'm just someone who made a choice. Do you understand what that choice cost you? My job, my safety, probably my life. She met his gaze. But you're still alive, so I guess it was worth something. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe, or respect. Most people don't talk to me like that. Most people aren't having the worst night of their lives. He almost smiled. Almost. Katya will come for you, he said. She doesn't forgive. She doesn't forget. And she has resources that would terrify you if you knew the extent of them. So what am I supposed to do? You have two options. He leaned forward slightly. Option 1. I give you $50,000, a new identity, and a plane ticket to anywhere in the world. You disappear, you start over, and you hope she never finds you. It was more money than Lena had ever dreamed of having, enough to actually escape, to become someone new, to build a life that didn't involve scraping by in a studio apartment and counting tips. What's option 2? You stay. His voice was quiet but intense. You stay, and I protect you. You become part of my world, publicly and visibly. You stand beside me at events, you live in my home, you become someone Katya can't touch without starting a war she knows she'll lose. Why would you do that? Because you saved my life. He said it simply, like it was obvious. Because I pay my debts, and because having you close is the best way to keep you alive. Lena thought about running. She thought about $50,000 and a new name and a quiet life somewhere far away. She thought about the version of herself who would have jumped at that chance, who would have disappeared gratefully into obscurity. But she also thought about Katya's face when she demanded Lena's name. She thought about Giuseppe giving her up without hesitation. She thought about 8 years of being invisible, of being passed over, of being nothing. If I stay, she said slowly, I'm not just your charity case. I'm not a victim you're rescuing. No, Volkov agreed. You'd be my responsibility, my problem, and potentially my weakness if Katya is smart enough to exploit it. Then why make the offer? Because I think you're stronger than you know. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. I've been watching people my entire life. I know when someone is soft all the way through and when they're just pretending to be soft to survive. You're the second kind. You don't know anything about me. I know you spent 8 years being invisible by choice. I know you're smart enough to recognize a trap when you see one. And I know that when faced with the choice between safety and doing the right thing, you chose right. His eyes held hers. That tells me everything I need to know. The car was moving through Manhattan now, past streets she knew, and into neighborhoods she'd only ever seen from a distance. The city looked different from inside a car like this, cleaner somehow, brighter, like it belonged to a different world entirely. If I say yes, Lena said, what happens? Tomorrow, you move into my penthouse. We go public immediately, dinner at Le Bernardin, where everyone will see us. Documents drawn up establishing you as my... He paused. Companion is too crude. Partner is too presumptuous. Let's say my person of importance. Your person of importance. It's a real designation in certain circles. It comes with protection, resources, and a very clear message to people like Katya that harming you means going to war with me. And what do you get out of it? His smile was thin. The satisfaction of knowing I repaid a debt, and perhaps the pleasure of watching Katya realize she's lost. Lena looked out the window at the city sliding past. Somewhere out there, her studio apartment was waiting, with its leaking faucet and broken heater and walls so thin she could hear her neighbors' arguments. Her uniform was probably still hanging in her locker at Romano's. Her tips from the week were in an envelope under her mattress, maybe $300, if she'd been lucky. That was her life, small and quiet and safe. And she was so tired of safe. Okay, she said, I'll stay. Volkov extended his hand, formal and old-fashioned. Then we have an agreement. She shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. This was real. This was happening. The car pulled up to a high-rise in Tribeca, all glass and steel and doormen in uniforms. Lena had walked past buildings like this 1,000 times, had looked up at their lit windows and wondered what kind of people lived in them. Now she was about to find out. One more thing, Volkov said as they stepped out of the car. In my world, trust is a rare commodity. You gave it to me tonight without knowing if I deserved it. I won't forget that. And I won't forget that you're the reason Katya wants me dead, Lena replied. He laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. Fair enough. The elevator rose smoothly to the penthouse, the city falling away below them. Lena caught her reflection in the polished doors, wrinkled uniform, tired eyes, hair falling out of its ponytail. She looked exactly like what she was, a waitress who'd stumbled into something far beyond her understanding. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, and Lena stepped into a space that didn't seem real. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, the city spread out like a map of light. The furniture was minimal and expensive, the kind of carefully curated emptiness that cost a fortune to achieve. The guest suite is through there, Volkov gestured to a hallway. You'll find clothes in the closet. I had my assistant stock it earlier. Earlier? Lena turned to stare at him. How did you know I'd say yes? I didn't, but I prepared for the possibility. He shrugged. In my business, hope for the best, but plan for everything. A woman appeared from another room, mid-40s, elegant, with sharp eyes that took in everything about Lena in 2 seconds. Mr. Volkov, your 9 o'clock call is waiting. Cancel it. He didn't look away from Lena. Clear my schedule for tomorrow as well. I have more important matters to attend to. The woman's eyebrows rose fractionally, but she nodded and disappeared. That's Elena, Volkov said. My assistant. If you need anything, ask her. She's discreet. Unlike me, apparently. Unlike you, she's had 20 years to learn discretion. He moved toward his study, then paused. Get some rest, Lena. Tomorrow, everything changes. She stood alone in the penthouse, surrounded by luxury she'd never imagined, committed to a path she didn't understand, bound to a man she'd met 3 hours ago. Her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number, not Volkov this time. We know where you live, we know where you work, and we know that Adrian Volkov can't protect you forever. Sleep well, Lena Voss. She deleted the message with shaking hands and walked to the guest suite, where she found a closet full of clothes that actually fit her, a bathroom with marble counters, and a shower that had 6 different settings, and a bed that was probably worth more than every piece of furniture she'd ever owned combined. Lena sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself cry. Not from fear, though she was terrified, and not from relief, though she'd survived the night. She cried because she understood with perfect clarity that the life she'd known was over. That invisible, struggling, safe version of herself was gone forever, and she had no idea who she was becoming in its place. Outside the window, Manhattan glittered in the darkness, beautiful and dangerous and full of possibility. Tomorrow, she would step into that world as someone new, someone visible, someone protected, someone important. Tonight, she was still just Lena Voss, a waitress who'd made one desperate choice and changed everything. Lena woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the disorienting realization that she wasn't in her studio apartment. The bed beneath her was too soft, the sheets too expensive, the silence too complete. For a moment she lay perfectly still, hoping it had all been a dream, the restaurant, the note, Katya's venomous face. Then she saw the clothes hanging in the open closet, designer labels she recognized from magazine spreads, and knew it was real. Her phone showed 7:43 a.m. She had 17 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize, and 3 text messages from Giuseppe, each shorter and more desperate than the last. "Lena, people came looking for you. They tore apart your locker, said if I see you I need to call them. I'm sorry. I can't help you anymore." She deleted the messages and climbed out of bed, her feet sinking into carpet that felt like clouds. The bathroom was absurd, all marble and gold fixtures and a shower with enough settings to launch a spaceship. She stood under water that was actually hot, actually had pressure, and tried to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do now. When she emerged 20 minutes later, wrapped in a bathrobe that probably cost more than her monthly rent, she found clothes laid out on the bed. Black pants that looked like they'd fit perfectly, a cream silk blouse, understated jewelry, even shoes in what appeared to be her exact size. A note rested on top of the pile in neat handwriting. "Breakfast in the dining room. We have much to discuss." A.V. Lena dressed slowly, her hands shaking slightly as she fastened the delicate silver necklace. The woman staring back at her from the mirror looked like someone else, someone polished, someone who belonged in a place like this. But her eyes were the same, scared and stubborn in equal measure. She found the dining room by following the smell of coffee. Adrian Volkov sat at a glass table, reading something on a tablet, a cup of espresso at his elbow. He'd traded last night's suit for dark jeans and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking almost casual except for the way he held himself, that same coiled alertness she'd noticed at the restaurant. "Good morning." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "I hope you slept well." "I slept in a bed that costs more than I used to make in a year," Lena said, sitting down. "So no, not particularly well." A woman appeared, not Elena from last night, but someone younger, wearing chef's whites. She set down a plate of fresh pastries, fruit, and what looked like an omelet that belonged in a cooking magazine. "This is Marie," Volkov said. "She handles meals. If you have dietary restrictions or preferences, tell her."
I eat whatever doesn't require choosing between food and electricity," Lena replied, then immediately regretted the bitterness in her voice. But Volkov just nodded, like she'd said something reasonable. "That won't be an issue anymore. Eat." She did, because she was starving and because the food was extraordinary. They ate in silence for several minutes, Volkov occasionally glancing at his tablet, Lena trying not to stare at the view of Manhattan spread out beyond the windows. Finally, he set down his coffee and looked at her directly. "Katya sent people to your apartment last night. They're watching it now." Lena's stomach dropped. "Everything I own is in that apartment." "Everything you owned," he corrected gently. "I had a team retrieve your belongings at 4 this morning. They're being stored in a secure location. We'll sort through them later and decide what's worth keeping." You broke into my apartment?" "I had professionals enter your apartment with appropriate discretion," he said. "There's a difference. Would you have preferred Katya's people get there first?" She wanted to argue, to be angry about the violation of privacy, but he was right. "What else did you do while I was sleeping?" "I made several calls, had documents prepared, arranged for your public debut tonight." He slid a folder across the table. "This is your new life, Lena. I suggest you familiarize yourself with it." She opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside were documents, photographs, dossiers on people she'd never met. The first page was a contract, dense with legal language she barely understood. "What is this?" "Your protection agreement. It establishes you as under my personal aegis. Essentially, it makes harming you equivalent to attacking me directly. In certain circles, that document is more binding than any marriage license." Lena scanned the text, picking out phrases that made her head spin. Comprehensive security detail, full financial support, residential privileges. Termination clause requires mutual consent. This says I can't leave without your permission. It says neither of us can terminate the arrangement without the other's agreement, Volkov corrected. It protects you from being forced out.
And it protects me from you walking away in the middle of a dangerous situation and getting killed. How generous.
It is, actually. His voice hardened slightly. You're not a prisoner, Lena, but you are a target now, and targets don't get to make unilateral decisions about their own safety. Not if they want to survive. She flipped through more pages. Photographs of men and women in expensive clothes, names and affiliations listed beneath each one. Who are these people? The inner circle. People you'll meet tonight and in the coming weeks. Study their faces, their relationships, their allegiances. In my world, knowing who stands with whom can mean the difference between life and death. One photo made her pause. Katya Volkov staring at the camera with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The description beneath was clinical. Ex-wife. Currently aligned with the Morozov faction. Holds significant real estate interests throughout Manhattan and Brooklyn. Known for patient, methodical retaliation. Patient and methodical, Lena read aloud. That's comforting. It should be. It means you have time. Volkov leaned back in his chair. Katya doesn't strike impulsively. She plans, she prepares, and then she moves when victory is certain. Right now, you're too visible, too protected. She'll wait for an opening. And when she finds one? She won't, because you're going to learn how to exist in this world without creating openings. He stood, gesturing for her to follow. Come with me. He led her through the penthouse to a room she hadn't noticed last night, a study lined with bookshelves, a massive desk dominating one wall. But it was the other wall that caught her attention. Floor-to-ceiling screens showed security feeds from what appeared to be dozens of locations. This is how I stay alive, Volkov said, gesturing to the screens. Information, constant, comprehensive information. I know where my enemies are, what they're planning, who they're talking to. Knowledge is the only real power. Lena watched the feeds cycle. Restaurants, parking garages, office buildings, private clubs. You're watching everyone. I'm watching the people who matter. There's a difference. He pulled up a new feed and Lena's breath caught. It was her old apartment building. Two men sat in a car across the street, visible even from the camera angle. Katya's people. They've been there since midnight. Why show me this? Because I want you to understand what you're up against. This isn't a movie, Lena. Katya won't send a single assassin that you'll dramatically overcome. She'll be patient and thorough, and when she moves, it will be overwhelming. He closed the feed. That's why you need to be smart, cautious, and willing to trust me, even when you don't want to. I don't know if I can trust you. Good, healthy paranoia will keep you alive. He almost smiled. But you can trust that my self-interest aligns with your survival. Dead, you're a martyr and a complication. Alive and visible at my side, you're a statement. A statement that says what? That I protect what's mine, that I repay my debts, that anyone who helps me gets my loyalty in return. His dark eyes held hers. In my world, reputation is everything. You saved my life, and now everyone will see that I've elevated you for it. That encourages loyalty. It makes people think twice before betraying me. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. So I'm a prop, a message to your people. You're a person who made a brave choice and is reaping the rewards. How you choose to see that is up to you. He checked his watch. Elena will be here in an hour. She'll help you prepare for tonight. Prepare how? How to dress. How to speak. How to stand next to me at a public event without looking terrified or out of place. His expression softened slightly. I know this is overwhelming, but you're stronger than you think, Lena. You proved that last night. He left her alone in the study, surrounded by screens showing a world she'd never known existed. She sank into the leather chair behind the desk and stared at the feeds, watching strangers move through their dangerous lives. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. You can't hide behind him forever. We'll be patient. We'll wait. And when he gets bored of his new toy, we'll be there. Lena deleted the message and turned off her phone. Elena arrived exactly 1 hour later, carrying garment bags and a tackle box that turned out to be full of makeup. She was all business, her sharp eyes assessing Lena with the same clinical precision she might use to evaluate a quarterly report. Stand up. Let me see you. Lena stood, feeling absurdly like she was being inspected. You're pretty, but you don't know it yet. That's good. It reads as genuine. Elena circled her slowly. Your posture is terrible. You've spent years trying to be invisible, and it shows. We'll fix that. I'm not a project. Yes, you are. You're Mr. Volkov's project, which makes you my project. Elena's voice wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. Tonight, you'll be photographed. Those photos will end up everywhere. Society pages, gossip blogs, certain people's threat assessments.
You need to look like you belong at his side, not like a waitress playing dress-up. The words stung because they were true. For the next 4 hours, Elena worked on Lena like a sculptor with marble. She taught her how to stand, shoulders back, chin up, spine straight. How to walk in heels without looking like she was about to fall. How to smile in a way that seemed genuine, but revealed nothing. In Mr. Volkov's world, everyone is always watching, Elena explained as she applied makeup with expert precision. Your clothes, your expression, your body language, it all communicates. Right now you're communicating uncertainty. We need to change that. I am uncertain. Then you lie with your face and your posture. Fake it until it becomes real. Elena stepped back, examining her work. You'll be seated at his right at dinner. That's the position of honor and trust. People will notice. They'll wonder who you are and why you matter. What do I tell them? Nothing. You smile politely and let Mr. Volkov control the narrative. If someone asks you a direct question, deflect gracefully. That's kind of you to ask, or I'd rather hear about you, or my personal favorite, I'm still getting my bearings. Elena handed her a pair of earrings that probably cost more than Lena's car. The goal isn't to impress them, it's to not give them ammunition. By the time Elena was finished, Lena barely recognized herself. The dress was midnight blue, elegant without being ostentatious. Her hair had been styled in soft waves. The makeup made her eyes look larger, her cheekbones sharper. She looked expensive. She looked like she belonged. Better, Elena said with something approaching approval. Now remember, you're not a waitress anymore. You're someone Mr. Volkov chose to protect. Hold on to that thought when you feel out of place. Volkov appeared in the doorway, now wearing a perfectly tailored black suit. He looked at Lena for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You clean up well, he said finally. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. But there was something in his eyes that might have been appreciation. The car is waiting. The restaurant, Le Bernardin, was the kind of place Lena had only seen in movies. Soft lighting, hushed conversations, waitstaff who moved like ballet dancers. The maitre d' greeted Volkov by name and led them to a corner table that offered a view of the entire dining room. As they walked through the restaurant, Lena felt every eye turned toward them. Conversations paused mid-sentence, phones appeared, angled carefully to capture photos without seeming obvious. Smile, Volkov murmured, like you're exactly where you want to be. She smiled, and it felt like lying, but Elena's training held. Shoulders back, chin up, move like you own the room. They sat, and within seconds, a waiter appeared with menus and wine recommendations. Volkov ordered in flawless French, not bothering to translate for Lena. She didn't care. She was too busy trying not to stare at the other diners, trying not to calculate how much a single meal here would cost. You're thinking too much, Volkov said quietly. I can see it on your face. I'm thinking that 48 hours ago, I was serving pasta to people who treated me like furniture. Now I'm sitting in one of the most expensive restaurants in Manhattan, wearing a dress that costs more than I made in 3 months. And I don't know what I'm doing here. You're here because you saved my life and I'm repaying the debt. He leaned forward slightly. But you're also here because I think you have the capacity to become more than you were. That interests me. Why? Because transformation is rare. Most people stay exactly what they've always been. They just get better at pretending otherwise. But some people actually change, evolve, become something new. His dark eyes held hers. I think you're capable of that. Before Lena could respond, a man approached their table. Late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit. His smile was warm, but his eyes were calculating. Adrian, I heard you were dining here tonight. His gaze shifted to Lena, openly curious. And you've brought a guest. How unusual. Robert. Volkov's voice was cordial but cool. This is Lena. Lena, Robert Castellano. He runs several import businesses along the waterfront. Import businesses? Lena had learned enough in the past 24 hours to know that was probably code for something else. Charming, Robert said, extending his hand. Lena shook it, keeping her expression neutral. I don't believe I've seen you at any of our usual gatherings, Lena. Are you new to the city? I'm new to this part of it, she said carefully. Robert's eyebrows rose slightly, recognizing the deflection. Well, welcome. I'm sure Adrian will take excellent care of you. To Volkov, we should talk soon. There are developments you should know about. Call Elena. She'll arrange it. Robert nodded and departed, but Lena caught him glancing back at their table as he returned to his own. Who is he really? Lena asked when he was out of earshot. Exactly who I said, a businessman. Also someone who reports everything he sees to the Morozov faction, which means Katya will know about you within the hour. Volkov's expression didn't change. Which is exactly what I wanted. You wanted her to know I'm here? I wanted her to see you at my side, in public, marked as mine. It removes any ambiguity about your status. He took a sip of wine. By tomorrow morning, everyone in my world will know that harming you means war with me. That's your shield, Lena, visibility. The meal continued with several more interruptions, people stopping by to greet Volkov, to assess Lena with curious eyes, to file away information for later use. Each time, Lena played her part. Polite, but distant. Comfortable, but unrevealing. By the time dessert arrived, she felt exhausted from the effort of performing. You did well, Volkov said as they waited for the check. Better than I expected for your first time.
I've been performing my whole life, just different audiences. Yes, but this audience bites. He signed the bill without looking at it. There's one more stop tonight. A private club. Very exclusive. Very important. More people I need to impress? More people you need to survive. There's a difference. The club was in Midtown. Unmarked door. No sign. The kind of place you'd walk past without noticing unless you knew what to look for. The doorman nodded at Volkov and stepped aside without a word. Inside was all dark wood and leather, soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. The patrons were uniformly well-dressed, uniformly dangerous-looking. Conversations died as Volkov entered with Lena at his side. He led her to a private room in the back, where 3 men sat around a table playing cards. They looked up as Volkov entered, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Gentlemen, Volkov said, I'd like you to meet Lena Voss. She's under my protection, effective immediately. The oldest of the 3, a man with iron gray hair and scars on his knuckles, set down his cards. This is the one who warned you? About Katya's ambush? Yes. She doesn't look like much. She doesn't need to look like anything except mine. Volkov's voice was casual, but carried an edge. I'm here as a courtesy, Victor, to make sure there's no confusion about her status. Victor studied Lena with flat, cold eyes. Katya won't like this. Katya doesn't have to like it. She just has to accept it. Volkov pulled out a chair for Lena. Sit. We won't be long. Lena sat, her heart hammering, while the men returned to their card game. They spoke in rapid Russian, occasionally glancing her way. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Skeptical, calculating, measuring her worth against whatever complications she represented. After 20 minutes that felt like hours, Volkov stood. Thank you for your time, gentlemen. I trust we understand each other. Victor nodded slowly. We understand. But Adrian, this protection of yours, it only works if you're stronger than Katya's allies. Are you certain you are? Yes, Volkov said simply. And soon, everyone else will be certain too. In the car afterward, Lena finally let herself exhale. What was that about? Establishing your legitimacy. Victor controls the Brighton Beach territories. If he acknowledges my claim on you, others will follow. Volkov loosened his tie slightly. You're not just protected by me, Lena. You're protected by everyone who doesn't want to challenge me. And if someone does challenge you, then you'll find out exactly how far I'm willing to go to keep my word. The car pulled up to the penthouse, and they rode the elevator in silence. Lena's feet ached from the heels, her face hurt from smiling, her mind spun from trying to process everything she'd seen and heard. When they entered the penthouse, Volkov poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. To survival,
he said, raising his glass. To having no idea what I've gotten myself into, Lena replied, and drank. The whiskey burned going down, but it helped settle her nerves. You should rest, Volkov said. Tomorrow will be easier. Will it? No, but you'll be better at pretending it is. Lena started toward the guest suite, then paused. Adrian, earlier, when we were at the club, Victor asked if you were stronger than Katya's allies. Are you? He was quiet for a long moment. I'm strong enough to protect you. That's all you need to know. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm giving tonight. He turned toward his own room. Sleep well, Lena. But she didn't sleep well. She lay in the expensive bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Robert Castellano's calculating eyes, and Victor's scars, and the way everyone had looked at her like she was a problem to be solved or an opportunity to be exploited. Her phone buzzed at 2 a.m. She'd turned it back on out of habit. You looked pretty tonight. Too bad pretty won't save you. Kay. Lena stared at the message, her blood running cold. Katya had been watching, had seen everything, had probably enjoyed watching Lena parade through that world like a child playing dress-up. She got out of bed and walked to the windows, looking out at Manhattan's endless lights. Somewhere out there, Katya was planning her next move. Somewhere out there, people were making decisions about Lena's life without her input or consent. And somewhere in this penthouse, Adrian Volkov was either her salvation or her doom, and she still couldn't tell which. The city glittered back at her, beautiful and merciless, and Lena understood with perfect clarity that there was no going back. She could only move forward into this new life, learning its rules, becoming whoever she needed to become to survive it. Tomorrow, she would wake up and play her part again. She would smile and deflect, and stand at Adrian's side like she belonged there. And maybe if she played it well enough and long enough, she'd forget that she was terrified. Maybe she'd even forget who she used to be. But tonight, standing at the window in borrowed silk pajamas, looking out at a city that had never cared about her existence until 48 hours ago, Lena let herself remember. She remembered the studio apartment, the broken heater, the tips counted out on her mattress. She remembered being invisible. And she mourned that version of herself, even as she knew she could never go back to being her. The woman in the window's reflection was someone new, someone learning to be dangerous in a world that rewarded danger, someone who'd saved a life and lost her own in the process, someone who had no choice but to keep moving forward because standing still meant death. Lena pressed her palm against the cold glass and whispered to her reflection, "Who are you becoming?" The city offered no answers. It never did. She returned to bed and lay awake until dawn, listening to the unfamiliar silence of a place too expensive for noise, too high above the streets for the sounds of ordinary life to reach. When morning finally came, she would put on another designer outfit and another practiced smile. She would stand beside Adrian Volkov and play her part in whatever theater of violence and power he inhabited. But for these last few hours of darkness, she let herself grieve for Lena Voss, the waitress, the invisible woman, the girl who'd thought saving someone's life was the right thing to do. That girl was gone, and the woman taking her place had yet to fully arrive. The woman staring back at Lena from the bathroom mirror 3 weeks later was a stranger wearing her face. The circles under her eyes had faded thanks to expensive creams Elena had provided. Her hair had been cut and styled by someone who charged more per hour than Lena used to make in a week. Even her posture had changed, shoulders back, chin lifted, the invisible waitress replaced by someone who looked like she belonged in penthouses and private clubs. She hated how easily she'd adapted. "You're overthinking again." Adrian's voice came from the doorway. He was already dressed for the evening in a navy suit that probably cost more than a used car. "I can see it in your face." "I'm allowed to think." "Thinking is fine. Spiraling into self-doubt an hour before we're due at the Castellano Gala is counterproductive." He stepped into the bathroom, adjusting his cufflinks. "You've done this a dozen times now. Tonight won't be different. Tonight is the Castellano estate, Robert's home territory. You said yourself that half the people there will be allied with Katya, which is exactly why we're going." Adrian met her eyes in the mirror. "Hiding makes you look weak. Showing up makes a statement." Lena turned to face him directly. "And what statement is that? That you're willing to parade me in front of your enemies? That I'm not afraid of them? That you're not a secret I need to keep hidden?" His expression softened slightly. You're doing well, Lena. Better than most people would in your position. Most people didn't stumble into this life because they couldn't mind their own business. Most people would have walked past my table and let me die. He reached out and adjusted the pendant at her throat, a diamond so flawless it probably had its own security detail. You made a different choice. Now you have to live with the consequences. The words would have sounded harsh from anyone else, but Adrian's tone was almost gentle. That was the thing she'd learned about him in 3 weeks of living in his world. He was capable of extraordinary violence, but he was never cruel without purpose. He'd killed men, she was certain, but he'd never once raised his voice to her. It made him harder to hate, and far more dangerous to trust. Elena appeared in the doorway, carrying Lena's dress for the evening. The car will be ready in 30 minutes. Mr. Castellano's security has already been briefed on your arrival. Will they be checking for weapons? Lena asked, half joking. Yes, Elena replied, completely serious, which is why yours will be concealed properly. Lena's stomach dropped. My what? Adrian pulled a small handgun from his jacket pocket, the metal gleaming dully in the bathroom light. Insurance. Marcus will teach you how to use it tomorrow, but for tonight, just know where it is and how to access it. I'm not carrying a gun to a party. You're carrying protection to a gathering of people who would kill you if they thought they could get away with it. He set the weapon on the marble counter. It's a .380, small, light, easy to conceal in the clutch Elena selected. 8 rounds. Safety here, trigger here, point and pull if you need to. Don't hesitate. I've never fired a gun in my life. Then pray you don't have to start tonight. He picked up the weapon and showed her how it fit into the designer clutch that matched her dress. But if something happens, if someone reaches for you, if there's gunfire, if I tell you to run, you take this and you don't think. You just act. Lena stared at the clutch, at the deadly weight hidden inside something made to hold lipstick and credit cards. Is it really that dangerous? It's always that dangerous. Adrian's dark eyes held hers. The difference is tonight, you'll be surrounded by people who smile while they plan your death. At least Katya's people on the street are honest about wanting to kill you. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be. It's meant to keep you alert. The dress Elena had chosen was deep emerald green, the fabric clinging in ways that made Lena feel simultaneously beautiful and exposed. She'd learned to move in heels without wobbling, to smile without revealing the fear that still lived in her chest like a caged bird. But she hadn't learned how to stop feeling like an imposter. The drive to the Castellano estate took 40 minutes, the city giving way to the manicured wealth of the outer suburbs. The house, calling it a house was like calling the ocean damp, sprawled across what had to be 10 acres, all stone and glass and strategic lighting that made it look like something from a Gothic novel. Robert likes to impress people, Adrian murmured as their car joined the line of vehicles approaching the circular drive. The house is new money pretending to be old. Everything about him is performance. Unlike you, I don't pretend to be anything except what I am. He glanced at her. Remember what we discussed. You stay at my side unless I explicitly tell you otherwise. You don't accept drinks from anyone except the staff I've vetted. You don't go anywhere alone. You make it sound like I'm being hunted. You are. He said it simply, like he was commenting on the weather. Katya's been quiet for 3 weeks. That means she's planning something. Tonight, with this many people, this much chaos, it's the perfect opportunity. Lena's hand tightened on the clutch, feeling the weight of the gun inside. Then maybe we shouldn't go. Not going would be worse. It would show weakness, and in this world, weakness is blood in the water. The car stopped and a valet opened the door. Adrian stepped out first, then extended his hand to help Lena. Smile. You're walking into a room full of sharks, and they need to believe you're one of them. The entrance hall was magnificent, all marble and crystal, and a staircase that belonged in a movie. Guests milled about in evening wear that probably cost more than Lena's old apartment building. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that were tiny works of art. And everywhere, eyes turned toward Adrian and Lena. There she is, a woman's voice, honey-sweet and poisonous. Lena turned to see a blonde in a red dress approaching, her smile sharp as broken glass. Adrian's mysterious new companion. We've all been dying to meet you properly. Sophia. Adrian's voice was cool. I didn't realize Robert was inviting the Morozov people tonight.
Robert invites everyone, darling. You know how he is, so desperate to seem neutral.
Sophia's eyes raked over Lena with undisguised contempt.
And this must be the famous waitress, the one who's caused so much excitement.
Lena Voss. Lena extended her hand, channeling every bit of Elena's training.
And you are?
Sophia Morozov, Katya's cousin. She took Lena's hand with the enthusiasm of someone touching something dead.
You've made quite an impression, inserting yourself into our world.
I didn't insert myself anywhere. I was invited.
How quaint?
Sophia's smile never wavered.
Well, enjoy the party. These things can be so unpredictable. Accidents happen all the time at large gatherings.
She glided away, leaving the threat hanging in the air like perfume.
That was a warning, Lena said quietly.
That was Sophia being Sophia. She's all performance, no substance. But Adrian's hand had moved to the small of Lena's back, protective and possessive. Stay close. The evening unfolded like a fever dream. Lena was introduced to more people than she could remember. Businessmen who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. Women who assessed her jewelry and found her wanting. Political figures who shouldn't have been at a party like this but somehow were. And through it all, she felt Katya's presence like a ghost. The woman wasn't there. Adrian had confirmed that much. But her influence permeated everything. The way certain people looked at Lena, the comments about how brave she was to be here, the subtle suggestions that Adrian's protection might not be as comprehensive as he believed. By the time dinner was announced, Lena's nerves were frayed to breaking. The dining room could have seated 50 people comfortably. Place cards directed guests to specific seats, and Lena found herself positioned at Adrian's right, just as Elena had predicted. Across from them sat Victor, the scarred man from the card club, and his wife, a severe woman who looked like she'd been carved from ice.
Miss Voss, Victor's voice was gravelly.
You're looking well. The high life agrees with you.
I'm adapting. Adaptation is survival. He took a sip of wine.
But surviving and thriving, those are different things. Which are you doing?
I'm still figuring that out.
Victor's laugh was harsh but not entirely unkind. At least you're honest. That's rare in this company. The meal began, course after course of food that was more art than sustenance. Conversation flowed around Lena. Business deals discussed in euphemisms, political maneuvering disguised as small talk, threats delivered with smiles. She was picking at her third course when she noticed Adrian had gone very still.
What is it?
She whispered. Don't look now, but Katya just walked in. Lena's heart stopped. She forced herself to take another bite of food, to not react, to keep breathing. I thought you said she wasn't coming. I was told she wasn't coming. Someone lied. His voice was calm, but she could feel the tension radiating from him. When she approaches, and she will, let me handle it. Katya appeared 5 minutes later, moving through the dining room like a queen surveying her domain. She wore black, simple and devastating, her blonde hair swept up to reveal a neck adorned with diamonds. When she reached their table, she stopped and smiled. Adrian, what a pleasant surprise. Katya. He didn't stand. I heard you were in Paris. I was. I came back early when I heard about tonight's gathering. Her eyes shifted to Lena, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. And you must be Lena, the waitress who thinks she can play in the deep end. I'm not playing at anything. Lena kept her voice steady, channeling every bit of false confidence Elena had drilled into her. No? You're living in Adrian's penthouse, wearing his jewelry, attending events like this one. If that's not playing, what would you call it? Surviving.
Katya's laugh was genuine, which somehow made it worse. Oh, I like her, Adrian. She has spirit. Such a shame what's going to happen to her.
Nothing is going to happen to her. Adrian's voice could have cut glass. We've had this conversation, Katya. She's under my protection. Protection, Katya tested the word. Such an interesting concept. You protect her from me, from my associates, from the consequences of her meddling. But who protects her from you, Adrian? Who protects her from what you are? I'm not the threat here. Aren't you? Katya leaned down, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to Lena anyway. You've painted a target on her back by claiming her. You've made her visible to every enemy you have. And when they come for her, and they will, it won't be me who killed her. It will be you. She straightened, smiled at the rest of the table, and walked away. The silence that followed was suffocating. Is she right? Lena asked quietly. Did you make me more of a target? Yes. Adrian's honesty was brutal. But you were already a target the moment you warned me. This way, at least you have resources to defend yourself. Resources like a gun I don't know how to use and a penthouse I don't belong in? Resources like me. He turned to look at her fully. And that counts for more than you know. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Lena barely tasted the food, barely registered the conversations happening around her. All she could think about was Katya's words, the certainty in her voice when she'd predicted Lena's death. After dinner, guests filtered out to the ballroom for dancing and more drinks. Adrian kept Lena close, one hand always at her back or her elbow, a constant physical reminder of his presence. They were standing near the bar when the lights went out. The ballroom plunged into darkness, and for a moment there was nothing but confused murmuring. Then someone screamed, "Stay down!" Adrian's voice was in her ear, his body shielding hers as he pulled her toward the wall. "Don't move." Gunfire erupted somewhere across the room. Not many shots, maybe 3 or 4, but enough to send the crowd into panic. People screamed, ran, crashed into furniture in the darkness. Lena's hand found the clutch, found the gun inside. Her fingers closed around it and she pulled it free, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Adrian, I'm here." His hand covered hers on the weapon. "Safety off. Don't fire unless you have a clear target." The emergency lights kicked in, bathing the ballroom in dim red illumination. Lena could see people huddled on the floor, others pressed against walls. And in the center of the room, 3 bodies. She couldn't tell if they were dead or just wounded. She couldn't tell if she cared. "We're leaving." Adrian pulled her toward a side exit. "Now!" They moved quickly, Adrian's body still between her and the room. Behind them, she could hear shouting, crying, the chaos of a party-turned crime scene. The hallway was empty, all the security apparently flooding toward the ballroom. Adrian pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "Cars meeting us at the east entrance. Move." They ran, Lena's heels clicking against marble, the gun still clutched in her shaking hand. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound could be footsteps behind them. They burst through a side door into the cool night air, and there was the car, idling with the door open. Adrian practically threw Lena inside and followed, slamming the door. "Go," he told the driver. The car peeled out, tires squealing against the pavement. Lena was shaking so badly she could barely hold the gun. Adrian gently took it from her, engaged the safety, and set it aside. "What happened?" Her voice came out as a whisper. "Someone used the gala as cover to make a move. 3 people shot. I think they were Castellano's people, but I'm not certain yet." He pulled out his phone again, scrolling through messages. Could have been Katya, could have been the Morozovs, could have been someone else entirely taking advantage of the chaos. They could have been shooting at us. They could have been, but they weren't. He looked at her. If they'd wanted us dead, we'd be dead. This was something else. A message, maybe. Or a distraction. A distraction from what? That's what I need to find out. The car was moving fast now, leaving the estate behind. But first I need to make sure you're safe. Back at the penthouse, Adrian made a series of phone calls while Lena sat on the couch, still in her dress, still shaking. Elena appeared from somewhere, wrapped a blanket around Lena's shoulders, and pressed a cup of tea into her hands. "Drink," she said. "You're in shock." Lena drank, though she tasted nothing. Her mind kept replaying the moment the lights went out, the screams, the muzzle flashes in the darkness. Adrian finally ended his calls and came to sit beside her. 3 casualties. All of them Castellano's security. Professional hits, execution style, someone knew exactly who to target and when. He ran a hand through his hair. This wasn't random violence. This was a surgical strike. Against Robert? Possibly. Or against the idea of neutrality. Robert tries to play both sides, mine and Katya's. Maybe someone decided that was no longer acceptable. Who? I have suspicions. I'll know more in the morning. He looked at her, really looked at her. You held it together well tonight, better than I expected. I had a gun in my hand and no idea what to do with it. But you didn't panic. You didn't freeze. That matters. Lena set down the tea, her hands finally steadying. Adrian, Katya was right. You did make me a bigger target. Every enemy you have now sees me as a way to hurt you. Yes. So why do you keep dragging me to these things? Why not just hide me away until this blows over? Because it's never going to blow over. His voice was gentle but firm. This is my life, Lena. It's constant danger, constant maneuvering, constant threats. If you're going to survive in it, you need to learn how it works. You need to be visible, so everyone knows the cost of touching you. And what happens when someone decides the cost is worth it? Then I make sure they regret that decision. He stood, offering his hand. Come on, you need rest. But Lena didn't take his hand. She stayed seated, looking up at him with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. What if I told you I wanted out? That I wanted to take the 50,000 and disappear? Then I'd give it to you tomorrow and wish you luck. He met her eyes. But we both know you're not going to do that. How do you know? Because 3 weeks ago, you would have asked that question on day 1. You would have run the first chance you got. But you didn't. You stayed. You learned. You adapted. He smiled slightly. You're not running because part of you likes this life. The power, the visibility, the feeling of mattering. You'd never admit it out loud, but it's there. The words hit her like a physical blow because they were true. Some part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, thrived on the attention, on being seen after years of invisibility, on standing in rooms full of powerful people and having them notice her existence. That doesn't mean I belong here. Maybe not, but it means you're choosing to stay, and that choice has consequences. He extended his hand again. Sleep. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. This time she took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. In her room, Lena stripped off the dress and jewelry, washed away the makeup, and stood under the shower until the water ran cold. When she emerged, wrapped in one of the absurdly soft robes, she found a new message on her phone. Tonight was a taste. Next time, the bullets will find their mark. Run while you can. Kay? Lena deleted the message and turned off the phone. She climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the penthouse. Somewhere in the city, 3 people were dead or dying. Somewhere, Katya was planning her next move. Somewhere, decisions were being made that would determine whether Lena lived or died. And here she was, in a bed worth thousands of dollars, protected by a man she barely knew, transformed into someone she didn't recognize. The worst part was that Adrian was right. She wasn't going to run. She was going to stay and see this through, whatever this turned out to be. Because going back to being invisible felt like dying. And if she was going to die anyway, she'd rather do it while people remembered her name. Sleep came eventually, shallow and filled with dreams of gunfire and darkness and Katya's smile. When Lena woke, it was to sunlight streaming through the windows and the certainty that something fundamental had shifted. She'd stopped pretending she was going to leave. She'd stopped pretending she was the same person who'd slipped Adrian that note. That waitress was dead. She'd died in the darkness of the ballroom, in the moment Lena had pulled out a gun and been willing to use it. What was left was someone new, someone harder, someone who could smile at people who wanted her dead and sleep in the home of a man whose protection came at a price she still didn't fully understand, someone who was learning to be dangerous. And that terrified her more than anything Katya could do. Marcus arrived at 7 the next morning with a duffel bag and the expression of someone who'd seen too much violence to be surprised by anything. He was compact and muscular, late 40s, with gray threading through his dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. "You're the one who needs training," he said, looking Lena up and down with clinical assessment. "Adrian says you held a weapon last night but didn't know how to use it." "I know which end the bullets come out of. That's about it." "Then we have work to do." He gestured toward the hallway. Adrian had the West Room cleared. We'll start there. The West Room had been transformed overnight. Mats covered the floor, targets hung on one wall, and a table held an array of weapons that made Lena's stomach clench. "I thought we were just learning about the gun." "The gun is part of it, but in close quarters, a gun can be taken away." Marcus set down his duffel bag and pulled out training knives with blunted edges. "First rule, anything can be a weapon if you're desperate enough. Second rule, Your goal is never to win a fight. It's to survive long enough to escape. For the next 3 hours, Marcus put Lena through drills that left her sweating and bruised. He taught her where to strike to cause maximum pain: throat, eyes, groin, knees. He showed her how to break a grip, how to use an attacker's momentum against them, how to recognize when someone was about to move before they actually did. "You're thinking too much," he said when she hesitated before a strike. "Thinking gets you killed. Reacting keeps you alive." "I'm not a fighter." "No, but you're a survivor. I can tell the difference." He demonstrated a move again, slower this time. Fighters look for confrontation. Survivors do whatever it takes to get out alive. You're the second kind, or you wouldn't have lasted this long. By the time they moved to firearms training, Lena's arms ached and her lungs burned. Marcus started with the basics: how to hold the weapon, how to aim, how to control the recoil. He made her practice loading and unloading until she could do it without looking. "In a real situation, you won't have time to think," he explained. "Muscle memory takes over. That's why we drill until your hands know what to do, even when your brain is screaming." She fired at paper targets until her ears rang despite the protection. Marcus corrected her stance, her grip, her breathing. When she finally hit the center of the target 3 times in a row, he almost smiled. "Better. You're not going to win any competitions, but you might survive an ambush." He cleared the weapon and handed it back to her. "Remember, the gun is your last resort. If you're pulling it out, something has already gone very wrong." Comforting. It's not meant to be comforting. It's meant to keep you alive. He started packing up his equipment. "We'll do this every other day until it becomes second nature. Adrian wants you competent, not just armed." After Marcus left, Lena showered and found Adrian in his study, surrounded by screens and documents. He looked up when she entered, his eyes taking in the bruises already forming on her arms. Marcus doesn't believe in gentle training. Marcus believes in results. Adrian gestured to the chair across from his desk. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck, but I hit the target." "I heard." There was approval in his voice. "You're learning faster than I expected." "I'm motivated. People keep trying to kill me." "About that." He pulled up something on one of his screens. "I got confirmation this morning about last night's shooting. It was ordered by Dmitry Morozov, Katya's uncle. He's escalating." "Why? What did Robert do?" "Robert made the mistake of hosting both of us at the same event. Dmitry saw that as choosing sides, even though Robert was trying to stay neutral." Adrian's expression hardened. 3 of Robert's best security people are dead because Dmitry wanted to send a message, and that message is that neutrality is no longer an option. Lena felt cold. "So everyone has to choose between you and Katya?" "Between me and the Morozov faction, yes. Katya's the face, but Dmitry's the real power behind their operation." He turned the screen so Lena could see the file displayed. "He's old school, ruthless, believes in making examples of people who cross him." The photo showed a man in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished-looking, the kind of person who'd look at home in a boardroom or a country club. But his eyes were dead, empty of anything resembling mercy. "He wants me dead, doesn't he?" "He wants you to be a lesson. Katya wants revenge. Together, they're a problem." Adrian closed the file, which is why we're going to accelerate our timeline. "What timeline?" "The one where I dismantle their operation piece by piece until they don't have the resources to threaten you anymore." He said it calmly, like he was discussing a business merger. "I've been building toward this for months. Last night just moved up the schedule." "You're going to war because of me." "I'm going to war because Dmitry is forcing my hand. You're just the excuse he needed." Adrian stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "This was always going to happen, Lena. The Morozovs have been pushing boundaries for years. Eventually, someone had to push back. And that someone is you." "Yes." He turned back to face her. "Which means things are going to get more dangerous before they get better. There's going to be retaliation, escalation, casualties. And through all of it, you need to stay visible at my side." "Why? Wouldn't I be safer hidden away?" "No. Because if you disappear, they'll assume I'm protecting a weakness. But if you're out there, confident and untouchable, you become a symbol of my strength." His dark eyes held hers. "I know what I'm asking, but this is the reality of the choice you made." Lena thought about arguing, about demanding to be sent away somewhere safe. But she knew Adrian was right. Safety was an illusion. The only real protection she had was standing next to the most dangerous man in the room and making everyone believe she belonged there. What do you need me to do? Tonight there's a private auction, very exclusive, very high stakes. A lot of important people will be there, including some who are still deciding which side to support. He pulled out his phone and showed her an invitation. We're going to make an appearance and remind everyone why betting against me is a bad idea. An auction for what?
Art, technically, but really it's a gathering of the powerful and the corrupt. Politicians, businessmen, people who make their money in shadows. He pocketed his phone. It's also where Katya will be, along with Dmitri. Lena's breath caught. You're taking me into a room with both of them? I'm taking you into a room where they can't touch you without starting a war in front of witnesses they can't afford to have. He stepped closer. This is about power, Lena.
About showing them that you're not hiding, not running, not afraid. But I am afraid. I know, that's what makes you brave. His expression softened slightly. Fear is natural. Acting despite the fear, that's courage. Elena arrived an hour later with another dress, this one black and severe, elegant in its simplicity. She did Lena's makeup with a heavier hand than usual, dramatic eyes, dark lips, the look of someone who could sit at a poker table and never reveal her hand. Tonight, you're not the ingenue, Elena explained as she worked. You're Adrian's equal, his partner, someone who chose this life deliberately. But I didn't choose it. Then make them believe you did. Confidence is 9/10 performance. She stepped back, examining her work. You look dangerous. That's good. Dangerous keeps you alive. The auction was held in a converted warehouse in Red Hook, the kind of place that looked abandoned from the outside but revealed its luxury only to those who knew where to look. Security was everywhere, subtle but thorough, checking invitations and weapons with equal efficiency. Adrian kept Lena close as they entered, his hand at the small of her back. The main floor had been transformed into an elegant auction house, with rows of seats facing a stage where pieces of art were displayed. But the real action was in the private rooms upstairs, where deals were made and alliances formed over champagne and promises. Stick to the script, Adrian murmured as they climbed the stairs. You're here because you want to be. You're not a victim or a refugee. You're my choice. And what if someone asks why you chose me? Tell them the truth, that you saved my life and earned my loyalty. He smiled slightly. It has the benefit of being both honest and intimidating. The private lounge was full of people Lena recognized from previous events. Robert Castellano stood near the bar, looking diminished somehow, the confidence from his gala replaced by wariness. Victor was there with his ice sculpture wife, along with Sofia Morozov and a dozen others who'd learned to navigate the dangerous waters between Adrian's world and the Morozovs. And in the corner, holding court like a queen, was Katya. She wore white tonight, a deliberate contrast to Lena's black, her hair swept up in an elaborate style. When her eyes found Lena across the room, her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. She's noticed you, Adrian said quietly. Don't react. Just acknowledge and move on. Lena nodded at Katya the way Elena had taught her. A slight tilt of the head, nothing more. The gesture of an equal, not a supplicant. Katya's smile widened and she started across the room. Here we go, Adrian murmured. Lena. Katya's voice was honey-sweet poison. How lovely to see you again, and looking so comfortable. I suppose you've adjusted to your new circumstances? I've adapted. Lena kept her voice level. As you do. As one does, Katya corrected, the grammar lesson a tiny power play. Though I have to admire your resilience. Most people in your position would have run by now. I'm not most people. No, you're certainly not. Katya's eyes flicked to Adrian. You've trained her well. She almost sounds like she belongs here. She does belong here. Adrian's voice was flat. We've established that. Have we? Katya took a sip of champagne. I thought we'd established that you're using her as a pawn in a game she doesn't understand. Then perhaps you should explain it to her, Adrian replied. Since you seem so concerned about her understanding. Katya turned her full attention to Lena, and it was like being studied by a predator deciding whether you were worth the effort of killing. The game is simple, dear.
Adrian wants to expand his territory. My family wants to maintain ours. You're the excuse for the war that's about to happen, the innocent bystander whose protection justifies his aggression. She leaned in slightly. But when the shooting starts and the bodies pile up, remember that you're not a player in this game. You're a piece on the board, and pieces get sacrificed. Is that a threat? Lena asked, proud that her voice didn't shake. It's a prediction, Katya straightened. Enjoy the auction, Lena. I hear tonight's lots are particularly valuable, though none quite as valuable as your life, I imagine. She glided away, leaving Lena's heart hammering in her chest. Breathe, Adrian said softly. You did well. I feel like I'm going to throw up. Later. Right now, we have a room to work. He guided her toward a group of men discussing something in low voices. Senator Mitchell, good to see you. The next hour was a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Lena played her part, smiling and deflecting, letting Adrian lead while making it clear through her body language that she was there by choice. She watched people's eyes as they assessed her, saw them recalculate their understanding of Adrian's resources and motivations. The actual auction began at 9, attendees filtering down to the main floor to bid on pieces that were beautiful and probably stolen. Lena sat beside Adrian in the third row, watching as paintings and sculptures were displayed and sold for obscene amounts of money. Do you actually want any of this? She whispered. No, but attending sends a message that I'm confident enough to participate in society, rather than hide like Dimitri's declared war. He raised his paddle for a small bronze sculpture. Besides, you need art for the penthouse. The walls are too empty. He won the sculpture for $80,000, and Lena tried not to think about how that money could have changed her entire life a month ago. The auction was winding down when she noticed the shift in the room. Subtle, just a few people moving toward the exits, others checking their phones with sudden intensity. Adrian noticed too, his posture changing almost imperceptibly. Something's happening, he murmured. A man appeared at his elbow, one of his security team dressed to blend with the wealthy attendees. He leaned in and whispered something that made Adrian's expression go cold. We need to leave. Now. He stood, taking Lena's arm. Don't run, but don't dawdle. They moved toward the exit, Adrian's security forming a loose circle around them. Lena could feel other people starting to notice, starting to move. And then she saw him. Dmitry Morozov stood near the main entrance, flanked by 4 men who had the stillness of professional violence. His eyes found Adrian across the room, and something passed between them, a silent declaration of intent. Back exit, Adrian said, changing direction smoothly. Stay close. They were 10 feet from the rear door when gunfire erupted. Not in the auction house, outside in the street. Automatic weapons, the sound unmistakable and terrifying. People screamed, dropped to the floor, scrambled for cover. Adrian pulled Lena down behind a pillar, his body shielding hers. His security team had weapons drawn, covering different angles. This is it, Adrian said, his voice calm despite the chaos. This is Dimitri's move. More gunfire, closer now. The rear exit exploded inward and men in tactical gear poured through. Not police. Their movements were too coordinated, too purposeful. They're coming for me, Adrian said. He turned to Lena, pressing something into her hand. A key. There's a service tunnel beneath the stage. Follow it north until you reach a maintenance exit. The key opens it. My car will be waiting on Kent Street. What about you? I'm going to give you time to run. He kissed her forehead, quick and fierce. Go, now. Adrian, go! His security team moved to cover her as she ran toward the stage, her heels slipping on polished floor. Behind her, she heard Adrian's voice, commanding and clear, drawing attention away from her escape. She found the service door right where he'd said, yanked it open, plunged into darkness. The tunnel was narrow and smelled of mold and old water. She ran blind, hands outstretched, heart slamming against her ribs. Footsteps behind her. Someone had followed. Lena ran harder, her breath ragged, the key clutched so tight it cut into her palm. The tunnel seemed endless, a nightmare of darkness and echoing footsteps, and the certainty that she wouldn't make it out. Then, ahead, a door. She fumbled with the key, hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. The lock turned, and she burst out into an alley. No car.
Kent Street was empty except for streetlights and shadows. The door behind her crashed open, and a figure emerged from the tunnel. Katya. She had a gun, held casually at her side, and her white dress was somehow still pristine despite the chaos.
"Hello, Lena." Her voice was almost gentle. "Did you really think Adrian could protect you from everything?" Lena backed away, her mind racing. The gun Adrian had given her weeks ago was in her clutch, but her clutch was back at the auction house. She had nothing but the key and her training and the knowledge that she was about to die.
"Katya, please." "Please what? Please let you go? Please forget that you destroyed my marriage and my plans?" Katya laughed. "You don't get to beg, dear. You gave up that right when you chose him over your own safety." She raised the gun, and time seemed to slow. Lena thought about running, but there was nowhere to go. She thought about pleading, but Katya's eyes were empty of mercy. She thought about all the training Marcus had given her, all the preparation, and realized it meant nothing against a bullet. Then a car screeched around the corner, Adrian's black sedan driven by one of his people. It skidded to a halt between Lena and Katya, the passenger door flying open. "Get in!" the driver shouted. Lena dove for the car and Katya fired. The bullet hit the door frame inches from Lena's head, metal sparking. She scrambled inside and the car was moving before the door fully closed. More gunfire, the rear window shattering. The driver, Marcus, she realized, drove like he was fleeing hell itself, taking corners too fast, running red lights, putting distance between them and Katya. "Adrian?" Lena gasped. "He's alive. Pinned down but alive." Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" "Define okay." "Not shot." "Then yes." They drove for 20 minutes, taking a route so circuitous that Lena lost all sense of direction. Finally, Marcus pulled into an underground parking garage and killed the engine. "We wait here until Adrian confirms it's safe to move." They sat in silence, Lena's hands still shaking, adrenaline making her feel sick and electric at the same time. She'd almost died. Katya had actually pulled the trigger, had actually tried to end her life. And all Lena could think was that she wanted to go back and fight. The realization shocked her. A month ago, she would have been grateful to escape. Now, part of her was angry that she'd run, that she'd let Katya have the satisfaction of making her flee. "You did good," Marcus said quietly. "Stayed calm, followed the plan, got out alive. That's what matters." "Is it?" Lena's voice was raw, "because it feels like running away." Running away is survival, and survival is how you win. Adrian's call came 30 minutes later. Marcus answered, listened, then hung up and started the car. "We're clear. He's at the secondary location." The secondary location turned out to be a brownstone in Park Slope, nondescript and quiet. Adrian met them at the door, his suit jacket gone, a cut above his eye, but otherwise intact. "You made it," he said when he saw Lena, and the relief in his voice was genuine. "Katya was waiting for me." The words tumbled out. She had a gun. She fired. If Marcus hadn't shown up, but he did. Adrian pulled her inside, his hands checking her for injuries even though she had said she was fine. "You're alive. That's what matters." "What happened at the auction?" "Dimitri's people tried to corner me. My security held them off long enough for the police to get involved." He smiled grimly. "Turns out, shooting up a high society auction is bad for business. Half the people there were politicians and judges. Dimitri's going to have a hard time explaining this one." "So you won?" "We survived. That's different than winning." He led her into a living room that was furnished but clearly not lived in. A safe house, she realized. "But we hurt them tonight." Dimitri showed his hand, got sloppy, drew too much attention. "That's a mistake he can't easily fix." Lena sank onto the couch, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. "Katya looked me in the eyes and tried to kill me. She didn't even hesitate." "I know." Adrian sat beside her. "And now you know what we're really dealing with. Not posturing or threats. Actual violence. Actual death." "I should be more scared. You should be terrified. But you're here, and you're processing, and you're not falling apart. That tells me you're stronger than even I thought." Lena looked at him, at this man who'd pulled her into his world and transformed her into someone she didn't recognize. "What happens now?" "Now we regroup, plan, Prepare for the next move. His dark eyes held hers. Because Katya's not going to stop. Dimitri's not going to back down. This ends only one way. How? With one of us dead or all of them gone. He said it simply, without drama. That's the reality. Lena thought about the gun in Katya's hand, the cold certainty in her eyes. She thought about the moment she'd been willing to pull her own trigger if given the chance. She thought about who she was becoming. Then we make sure it's them, she said quietly. Adrian studied her for a long moment, something like pride flickering in his expression. You've changed. I had to. The alternative was dying as the person I used to be. And who are you now? Lena met his eyes. I'm still figuring that out, but I know I'm not running anymore. He nodded slowly. Good. Because the next phase is going to require you to be present, committed, and willing to do whatever it takes to survive. Even if that means killing? The question hung in the air between them. Even then, Adrian said finally, if it comes to that. Lena looked down at her hands, still shaking slightly, still bearing the mark where the key had cut into her palm. These were the hands that had once carried trays and cleared tables. Now they'd held weapons and fled gunfire and nearly witnessed murder up close. Okay, she whispered. Then teach me what I need to know. Adrian stood and extended his hand. We start tomorrow. Tonight, you rest. But Lena didn't sleep when she finally lay down in the safe house's spare bedroom. She stared at the ceiling and replayed every moment of the night, burning it into her memory. The look in Katya's eyes, the sound of the gunshot, the feeling of nearly dying. And underneath it all, a question that terrified her more than any threat. When the moment came, when it was kill or be killed, would she hesitate? Or had she already become someone capable of pulling the trigger without flinching? She didn't know the answer, but she was afraid she was about to find out. The answer came 2 weeks later, in a way Lena never could have predicted. She'd spent those 14 days in intensive training with Marcus, learning not just how to fight, but how to think like someone who expected violence. Adrian had pulled back from public appearances, working from the safe house and various secure locations, orchestrating something he wouldn't fully explain. You'll know when it's time, was all he'd say when she pressed him. Lena had grown stronger in those weeks. Her aim improved until she could hit center mass consistently. Her hand-to-hand skills developed enough that Marcus actually had to work to pin her during drills. But more than the physical changes, something inside her had hardened. The fear was still there, but it no longer paralyzed her. It sharpened her instead. She was practicing at the range Marcus had set up in the safe house's basement when Adrian appeared in the doorway. We need to talk. She set down the weapon and removed her ear protection. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's finally right. He gestured for her to follow him upstairs. Dimitri made a mistake. A big one. In the living room, Adrian had spread documents across the table. Bank statements, property records, photographs. Elena was there too, along with Victor and 2 other men Lena recognized from Adrian's inner circle. Dimitri's been moving money, Adrian explained, pointing to highlighted transactions, laundering it through a series of real estate deals. Nothing unusual, except he got sloppy, left a trail that connects back to 3 different federal investigations. And? Lena asked. And I've been collecting evidence for the past 6 months, enough to bury him and half the Morozov operation. Adrian's smile was cold. But evidence only matters if it reaches the right people. Victor leaned forward. We've identified the prosecutor who'll actually use it, someone who can't be bought or threatened. She's been building a case against organized crime for years, just waiting for something solid enough to stick. So you're turning him into the authorities? Lena felt oddly disappointed. After all this, it ends with paperwork? It ends with Dimitri in federal prison for the rest of his life, his assets seized, and the Morozov faction shattered. Adrian met her eyes. Sometimes the most effective revenge is legal. He wanted a war. Instead, he gets to die slowly in a cell, knowing that I destroyed him without firing a shot. What about Katya? Katya's tied to enough of his operations that she'll face charges too. Even if she manages to avoid prison, she'll be ruined. No resources, no protection, no power. He picked up a photograph of Katya at some charity event, looking radiant and untouchable. She becomes invisible, just like you used to be. The poetic justice of it wasn't lost on Lena.
When does this happen? Tomorrow morning. The prosecutor gets the full package, and by noon, federal agents will be executing warrants across the city. Adrian started gathering the documents. Which means tonight is our last night of vulnerability. Once Dimitri is in custody, we're clear, but until then, he's dangerous and cornered. So what do? We make ourselves very public, very visible, and very protected.
He pulled out his phone and showed her an invitation. There's a private dinner tonight, small, exclusive, all of it carefully controlled. We're going to attend, and we're going to make sure everyone sees that we're not hiding. Elena stepped forward with a garment bag. I took the liberty of preparing your outfit. Tonight calls for something memorable. The dress was deep crimson, elegant and bold. Lena held it up, feeling the weight of the fabric, understanding that this was armor as much as fashion. One more night, she said quietly, and then it's over. One more night, Adrian confirmed, and then you're free to decide what comes next. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to address. The dinner was held in a private dining room at Daniel, the kind of restaurant where reservations were made months in advance, and the wine list required a financial disclosure. Security was everywhere, Adrian's people, blending seamlessly with the restaurant staff, creating layers of protection that were invisible to casual observation. Lena wore the crimson dress and the diamond necklace that had become her signature piece. She'd learned to move in this world, to smile at the right moments and deflect questions with practiced ease. But tonight felt different. There was a finality to it, a sense of something ending. The guest list was deliberately chosen, allies mostly, people whose loyalty to Adrian was beyond question. Robert Castellano was there, looking grateful to still be alive after the auction shooting. Victor attended with his severe wife. Even Senator Mitchell made an appearance, though he left early with transparent excuses about committee meetings. Katya and Dimitri were conspicuously absent, though Lena felt their presence like a shadow over the entire evening. They had to know something was coming. People like that always knew when the walls were closing in. You're quiet tonight, Adrian observed during the main course. Nervous? Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Lena took a sip of wine. It's been too easy, too calm. Sometimes calm is just calm. Not in your world. In your world, calm is the moment before the storm. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes, acknowledgement, maybe, that she'd learned his world's rhythms too well. You've changed so much from the woman who served me carbonara and slipped me that note. I had to. That woman would have died in the first week. Would you go back if you could? The question was casual, but Lena heard the weight beneath it. If I gave you a new identity and enough money to disappear, would you take it? Lena thought about her old studio apartment, the broken heater, the tips counted on her mattress. She thought about being invisible, about moving through the world without anyone noticing she existed. Ask me tomorrow, she said finally, when this is really over. The dinner was winding down when Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something shifted in his expression. We need to leave. Now. What is it? Dimitri knows. Someone tipped him off about the prosecutor. He was already standing, gesturing to his security. He's making a move tonight instead of waiting for morning. Victor was on his feet too, his phone pressed to his ear. My sources confirm. He's pulled together everyone he has left. They're coming here. The restaurant erupted into controlled chaos. Adrian's security team moved into position, guests were ushered toward secure exits, and somewhere in the building, alarms were being disabled and backup called. Get her out, Adrian told Marcus, who'd appeared from his position near the entrance. The usual route. What about you? Lena demanded. I'm staying to make sure everyone gets out safely. This is my fight, Lena. I won't ask others to face it while I run. Then I'm staying too. No. Yes. She cut him off, surprising them both. You said I needed to be visible, to show I wasn't afraid. Running now negates all of that. I stay, or your entire message falls apart. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, and Lena saw the calculation in his eyes, weighing her safety against the symbolism of her presence, the personal against the strategic. Fine, but you stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. Agreed? Agreed. Marcus handed her a weapon, the same compact 9mm she'd been training with. You remember everything I taught you? Don't think, react. She checked the magazine, chambered around, and gauged the safety. The movements were automatic now, muscle memory taking over. Good. He moved to cover the entrance. Stay sharp. The attack came 20 minutes later, fast and brutal. They came through the service entrance and the main doors simultaneously, men in tactical gear with automatic weapons, moving with military precision. Adrian's security engaged them immediately, and the restaurant became a war zone. Lena crouched behind an overturned table, Adrian beside her, the sound of gunfire deafening. She could see Marcus near the kitchen, returning fire with calm efficiency. Victor had produced a weapon from somewhere and was covering the rear exit. "How many?" Adrian shouted over the noise. "At least 12, Marcus called back. "Maybe more." Too many. Even with their preparation, even with Adrian's security, they were outnumbered. A man appeared in Lena's sightline, weapon raised, targeting Adrian. She didn't think. Her hand came up, found the target, squeezed the trigger. The recoil jolted through her arm and the man went down. She'd just killed someone. The realization should have devastated her, should have made her freeze or panic or break down. Instead, she felt nothing but cold clarity. He'd been about to kill Adrian. She'd stopped him. That was all that mattered. "Behind you!" Adrian's shout snapped her attention left, where another attacker was advancing. She fired twice, center mass, exactly as Marcus had drilled into her. The man dropped. 2 kills. 2 men dead by her hand. And she was still moving, still functioning, still alive. The firefight intensified. Someone threw a flashbang, and the world went white and silent. When Lena's senses returned, she saw Adrian grappling with an attacker, both of them struggling for control of a weapon. She aimed, waited for a clear shot, fired. The attacker fell. Adrian looked at her, blood on his face from a cut above his eye, and nodded. No words needed. She'd saved his life again, just like in the restaurant that first night, full circle. The gunfire began to taper off as Adrian's backup arrived. More security, better armed, overwhelming Dimitri's people with superior numbers and tactics. The attackers who could flee did. The ones who couldn't surrendered or died. In the sudden silence that followed, Lena's ears rang and her hands shook. The weapon felt impossibly heavy. She set it down carefully and looked at what she'd done. 3 bodies. 3 men she'd killed to protect Adrian and herself. "You did what you had to do." Adrian's voice was gentle as he took her hands. "You survived." "I killed them." "Yes, and they would have killed you without hesitation." He cupped her face, making her look at him. "You're alive, Lena. That's what matters." Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Adrian's phone buzzed with messages. His people coordinating, making sure the story was straight, ensuring that when the authorities arrived, they'd find a clear case of self-defense against armed attackers. "The prosecutor is moving up her timeline," Elena reported, her clothes disheveled but her voice steady. "Warrants are being executed right now. Dimitri won't make it through the night without being arrested." "And Katya?" Lena asked. "Agents are at her apartment. She'll be in custody within the hour." It was over. Actually over. Dimitri's desperate attack had failed, and now the full weight of the law was coming down on him and everyone in his organization. Lena started to laugh, harsh, slightly hysterical laughter that she couldn't quite control. She'd survived. She'd actually survived. Adrian pulled her close, and she buried her face in his shoulder, shaking with laughter that morphed into tears she hadn't known she was holding back. He held her while the police secured the scene, while statements were taken, while the machinery of justice began to grind forward. When she finally pulled back, she felt hollowed out but oddly light, like something heavy she'd been carrying had finally been set down. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go home. We rest. And tomorrow, we figure out what comes next." But tomorrow came faster than expected. Lena woke in the penthouse. They'd returned there after hours of police interviews and statements to find Adrian already up, standing at the windows with coffee, watching the sunrise over Manhattan. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, joining him. "Haven't slept properly in months. Not since that night at Romano's." He glanced at her. "But last night I actually feel like I could." "Because it's over?" "Because we won." He turned to face her fully. "Dimitri's in federal custody. Katya's facing charges that'll keep her tied up in court for years, even if she avoids prison. The Morozov faction is shattered, and you're alive. So are you." So are we both. He set down his coffee. Which brings us to the conversation we've been avoiding. Lena's heart rate picked up. What conversation? The one about what you want now that you're free to choose. Adrian's dark eyes were unreadable. I meant what I said before. I can give you a new identity, money, a fresh start anywhere in the world. You've earned it 10 times over. Is that what you want me to do? Disappear? What I want doesn't matter. This is about what you need. Lena walked to the window, looking out at the city that had terrified and transformed her. She thought about who she'd been 2 months ago. Invisible, struggling, safe in her smallness. That woman was gone, replaced by someone harder, sharper, capable of violence when necessary. She thought about the penthouse, the expensive clothes, the power that came from standing beside Adrian. She thought about the people who now knew her name, who treated her with respect or fear or both. And she thought about Adrian himself, this complicated, dangerous man who'd kept his word, who'd protected her, who'd never once lied about what his world would cost her. If I stay, she said slowly, what would that look like? Honestly, I don't know. He moved to stand beside her. I've never had a partner before. Not a real one. But I think we work well together. You see things I miss. You're brave in ways I'm not. And you challenge me to be better than I've been. Is this a business proposition or something else? I'm hoping it's something else. He took her hand. But I won't lie to you, Lena. My world is never going to be completely safe. There will always be enemies, always be risks. Staying means accepting that. And leaving means going back to being invisible. Or going anywhere else and becoming someone new. The choice is entirely yours. Lena looked down at their joined hands. His were scarred from years of violence. Hers were softer but no longer unblemished. She had calluses now from weapons training, small cuts from learning to fight. They matched in their way. I have conditions, she said finally. Name them. I'm not just your companion or your protected person. If I stay, I'm your partner, equal say in decisions that affect me, real involvement in what you do. Agreed. And I want to do something with the power I have now, something meaningful, not just attending parties and looking decorative. What did you have in mind? She'd been thinking about this for days, an idea forming in the quiet moments between training sessions. A foundation. For people like I used to be. Invisible people, struggling people, the ones the system forgets. With your resources and my understanding of what they need, we could actually help. Adrian studied her for a long moment. You want to turn blood money into something clean. I want to make something good come from all of this violence. She met his eyes. Is that naive? It's ambitious, difficult. It'll take years to build. He smiled slightly. I love it. So we can do it? We can do it together. He pulled her closer. Equal partners in business and everything else. Is that what you want? Lena thought about all the ways she could answer that question. She thought about safety and risk, about who she'd been and who she'd become. She thought about the moment she'd slipped Adrian that note and changed her life forever. Yes, she said simply. That's what I want. He kissed her then, not desperate or urgent, but sure and steady, the kind of kiss that promised futures instead of just moments. When they pulled apart, the sun was fully up, Manhattan gleaming in the morning light. There's one more thing, Adrian said. I need to take you somewhere. 20 minutes later, they were in the car, driving through morning traffic. Lena didn't ask where they were going. She'd learned to trust Adrian's sense of theater. They pulled up in front of Romano's Cucina. The restaurant looked exactly the same as it had 2 months ago. Same tired awning, same checkered curtains in the windows. But Giuseppe had put out a closed sign, and when Adrian knocked, the old man opened the door looking nervous. Mr. Volkov, I wasn't sure. Giuseppe's eyes found Lena and widened. Lena, you look different, she supplied. I know. Come in, please. Giuseppe ushered them inside, wringing his hands. I need to apologize. What I did, giving them your name, I've regretted it every day since. It's okay, Giuseppe. And surprisingly, Lena meant it. She understood his position better now, understood the impossible choices people made to protect what mattered to them. It's not okay. You were loyal to this place for 8 years, and I betrayed you the moment it became inconvenient. He looked at Adrian. If you're here for revenge, I'm not. Adrian pulled out a folder. I'm here to offer you a deal. Inside were documents, contracts, financial statements, renovation plans. Giuseppe read through them, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. You're buying the building and renovating the restaurant? Buying the building, renovating the restaurant, and establishing a culinary training program for underprivileged youth. Adrian glanced at Lena. It'll be managed through a foundation we're establishing. You'll stay on as head chef and program director if you want the position. Giuseppe looked between them, tears forming in his old eyes. Why would you do this? Because this is where it started, Lena said, where I made the choice that changed everything. I want it to be a place where other people can make choices too, where they can learn skills that give them options beyond survival. I don't deserve this kindness. Maybe not, but you're getting it anyway. Adrian set down a pen. The position comes with a real salary, benefits, and a percentage of ownership. If you're interested. Giuseppe signed without reading further, his hand shaking. Thank you, both of you. I won't waste this chance. As they left the restaurant, Lena felt something settle in her chest. The place where she'd been invisible would become a place where others could be seen. The sight of her transformation would transform others. That was your idea, wasn't it? Adrian asked as they walked back to the car. The training program. The foundation was my idea. You made it bigger and better. She took his hand. That's what partners do, right? Make each other's ideas better? Right. 6 months later, Lena stood in the newly renovated Romano's Cucina, watching the first class of culinary students work under Giuseppe's patient instruction. The restaurant was beautiful now, still recognizable but elevated, the worn edges smoothed away while keeping its essential character. Adrian stood beside her, his hand at the small of her back, a gesture that had become habit. They're doing well, he observed. Giuseppe's a good teacher, better than I expected. She watched a young woman, couldn't have been more than 20, practicing knife skills with fierce concentration. She reminds me of myself. Determined? Desperate, but learning that desperation can become determination if you have the right opportunities. The foundation had grown faster than Lena had dared hope. The culinary program was just the start. They'd added job training, legal aid for people caught in exploitative situations, and housing assistance for those transitioning out of poverty. It was funded entirely by Adrian's businesses, the legitimate ones and the ones he was slowly transforming into legitimacy, turning blood money into something clean, just as he'd said. Katya had pled out to reduce charges and disappeared into witness protection, trading everything she knew about her family's operations for leniency. Dmitri was serving 25 to life in a federal facility, his empire dismantled piece by piece. The war was over. They'd won. I have something for you, Adrian said, pulling Lena's attention back to him. He held out a small box. Inside was a key, not to a car or a building, but something older, more worn. What is this? The key to your old apartment. I bought the building 6 months ago, but I wanted to give you this before I renovated it. He closed her fingers around the key, in case you wanted her to go back, to remember who you were, or to close that chapter properly, or for whatever reason you might need. Lena looked at the key, feeling its weight. She thought about the studio apartment with its broken heater and thin walls, the woman who'd lived there, counting tips, and wondering if this was all there would ever be. I don't need to go back, she said, handing him the key. That woman is gone. I'm who I am now. And who is that? Someone who saved a life and lost her own in the process. Someone who found a new one in the rubble. She smiled. Someone who chose danger over safety and somehow survived anyway. Someone I love, Adrian added quietly. The words hung between them, significant and true. They'd danced around the feeling for months, but neither had said it directly until now. Someone who loves you back, Lena replied, equally quiet. Even though you're impossible and dangerous and you pulled me into a world I had no business entering. I'd apologize, but I'm not sorry. Good. I'd hate you if you were. He pulled her close, and they stood together watching the students work, watching Giuseppe teach, watching a small piece of the world become slightly better through their effort. It wasn't redemption. Adrian's past was too bloody for that.
and Lena had blood on her own hands now. But it was transformation.
It was taking what they'd both been and building something new from the wreckage. That night, they stood at the penthouse windows together, looking out at Manhattan, glittering in the darkness. Lena wore one of Adrian's shirts and nothing else, comfortable in a way she'd never imagined being comfortable in this world. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked. "That night at the restaurant? If you could go back, would you walk past my table instead of warning me?" Lena thought about it honestly. She thought about the fear and violence, about the people she'd killed and the innocence she'd lost. She thought about becoming someone capable of pulling a trigger without hesitation. And she thought about standing beside Adrian as his equal, about building something meaningful with resources she'd never dreamed of having, about being seen and known and powerful. "No," she said finally. "I wouldn't change it. That choice made me who I am. Even knowing what it cost you?" "Especially knowing what it cost me, because what I got in return was worth the price." He kissed her temple, and they stood in silence, two people who'd found each other in violence and built something like peace from the ruins. The city sprawled beneath them, full of invisible people struggling to survive, full of danger and opportunity in equal measure. Lena had been one of those invisible people once. Now she was something else entirely. She was Adrian Volkov's partner, the co-founder of a foundation that helped hundreds of people, a woman who'd killed to protect what mattered and somehow found her way to something like happiness anyway. She was Lena Voss, and she was finally completely visible. And she had learned that sometimes the scariest thing wasn't the danger you faced, but the person you became while facing it. Sometimes transformation required violence and loss. Sometimes the only way to find yourself was to destroy who you used to be. Lena had been a waitress who slipped a note to a stranger. That choice had shattered her life and rebuilt it into something unrecognizable. She'd become a weapon, a survivor, a partner. Someone who could navigate rooms full of sharks and come out alive. And standing there in the darkness with Adrian's arms around her and the city laid out below like a promise, Lena understood that she wouldn't trade any of it. Not the fear, not the violence, not even the moments when she'd been certain she would die, because all of it had led her here. To this moment, to this life, to this version of herself that was harder and sharper, but somehow more real than the invisible woman she'd been. The girl who'd served carbonara and dreamed small dreams was gone forever. And the woman who'd taken her place was just beginning to understand what she was capable of becoming. The city glittered, beautiful and merciless, and Lena smiled. She was home,